Hello, everybody. It is Heath Robinson with Topaz Labs, and I am thrilled to be back again with the one and only Rad Drew. You've been all over the place, Rad. How does it feel to be back home?
It's really good to be back at home. As he said, I just spent 6 weeks on the road, a couple of weeks in Tuscany doing a workshop with my good friend John Barclay, and then another workshop in the middle of Ohio where we photograph Amish and wildlife and wild animals actually that are in what do you call it, a preserve for endangered species. So some of the images that you'll see here were taken on that workshop, and then also got to head out to the West Coast and travel up and down California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, and ended up doing a workshop in the Palouse with John Barclay. So anyway, good to be home and back with Topaz. I've had a lot of fun working with some of the new tools that have come out. We'll be looking at some of those today. So today I want to show you AI Clear, which is the latest and greatest noise reduction tool that's come out from Topaz, and it is truly phenomenal, using artificial intelligence to eliminate noise from our images. The other thing that I'm excited about today is I've been exploring ReMask, which is one of the plugins that is used with Topaz. It allows us to remove backgrounds and replace them with other backgrounds, and kind of mask out things, cut out subjects and put them in other places. It's a really powerful tool, and I'm going to show you what I've learned about that in the past month. So without further ado, let's get rolling here. This is an image of a farmer in Amish country in Ohio, walking up the hill here, and I'm going to go through my basic workflow. Before I do that, just a quick around the screen here for Topaz Studio. I know it's been out over a year now, so most of us are pretty familiar with it, but this is the free interface, Topaz Studio. On the left over here, we have all the effects that you can apply, impression, glow, all these different things. Then on the right is our adjustment panel, and I'm going to click on this little blue box here. And these are all the adjustments that you can acquire with Topaz. The ones above this line right here are all part of the free Topaz Studio package. And just the free Studio package is really quite powerful. There's a lot you can do with it. But then each of these add even further adjustment options and processing options for you. Down below here is the tray where our images go when we bring them in, and you can minimize these by, like I could click over here and minimize the effects panel so I have more real estate, which I may go ahead and leave that way for now because it just gives us more room. One of the things that we can do with our images is we can crop them using these tools that are part of the standard Topaz Studio. So there's a crop, there's a healing tool, there's lens correction, which is part of the app, so it will correct distortion for most of the lenses on most common cameras today. You can also mask in here, and then you can click on the more button, and it allows you to rotate and size your image and do some other things. So a lot of options just with the basic studio. This image of my farmer, the first thing I'm going to do with this, I want to crop it, and this is one of these things where, yeah, I should have cropped this when I shot it, and I didn't. But I wanted to bring it down to a little bit, tighter on the farmer, and I wanted to eliminate that brightness in the sky up there. So I used the crop tool here, and one of the things, in fact, let me back out of this for a second because I always forget to do this. Whenever you want to go to crop up here, you want to switch from unconstrained to original if you want to maintain the original aspect ratio. So that's a really important step. If you don't do that, you end up sizing I don't know what you call that, but unconstrained. So that's the first thing, and then I'm just going to move that. You can also go over here and choose an aspect ratio of different kinds. So you could do a panoramic 16:9, or you could choose any of these other aspect ratios. The original one here I'm going to go with is a 3:2, and that's just fine for what I'm doing here. And I'm going to crop it probably something like that. Okay, so we're done. Get that out of there. I don't really have anything that I want to fix on the image. A lot of times I go around the edges to see if there's anything I want to clean up or take out. One of the things I might do, just because this little bright spot's going on up here in the upper left corner, I'm going to go ahead and choose my healing brush. And just to show you how this works, you can see the red brush there. Here's your brush sizing tool, a slider on the left. And I'm going to bring that down to be smaller. I want to take out, oh, where did it go? Oh, I can't do that easily here. I think it was right here. I'm going to just kind of block that out and see what happens here. We'll see how that works. And then I'll say done. And let's just see what it kind of got it. It didn't really do what I was looking for, but we may fill that in later with a vignette or something like that, because I didn't want that bright spot in my edge. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do with this is to launch the new AI Clear tool. And this is going to take a second. I'm going to go ahead and launch it. And you notice it blows the image up to 100%, and it begins doing its correction. And you know, Heath helped me here if I say this wrong, but this is an artificial intelligence tool. So it's basically been trained on how to create images without noise. And so it's been through millions, or I don't know, millions, thousands of images in order to figure out what no noise looks like under certain conditions.
Yep.
And so that's what, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It is actually millions of images.
Millions. Okay,
Yeah.
I knew it was a lot. So it's actually learned. Now I don't know if you saw what happened just then, but it just popped this image into very, very clear focus. There you can see a little bit. There's the original. You can see it's a little bit soft. This was taken, I think, with an 18 to 135 on my Fuji, and I was hand holding, but it just pulled the noise out of that. You can see. Now you notice over here under model strength, these are 3 different models that you can apply to the noise reduction. You could click on any of these, and I'm not going to do that right now. The high one takes takes a little longer, but the thing about these different modes, there's not a lot of noise in this particular image, and you really don't want to use the big gun over here, the high model strength, if you don't have a lot of noise, because you don't want to use more than you need. And for this particular image, low is just fine. But what'll happen sometimes if you've done much noise reduction, you've probably seen if you overdo it, your image can look sort of smooth, almost cartoonish. Well, that can happen here, not as much, but if it does begin to happen, you have this recover detail slider over here that you can begin to pull back some of the detail that might be getting smoothed out during noise reduction. So it's a really powerful tool, and I've just been blown away by how much it improves my, the clarity of my image. So I'm going to go ahead and close that down. The next thing that I'm going to do in my workflow on this particular image, and I don't do this all the time, but because I handheld this and so on, I'm going to go up to a plugin that I use called InFocus. And by the way, I'm working in the Topaz Studio. All of this can be run as plugins through Photoshop or Lightroom as well. So I'm going to go up here and grab this plugin called InFocus, and it's going to launch InFocus. And in a second here, it's going to increase everything up to 100% again, so we can really see this image well. And we've got the sliders over here that we can use. I typically go with one of the presets that's over here. You have a common, a detailed, and a minor sharpening. And if we look at the, let's just go straight for the detailed and take a look at what it is. It takes a second to process it, and watch. Did you see that? I mean, it really did a nice job of pulling that together. Now, it might be a little bit too much, so I may want to go back to maybe common. I don't want to over sharpen, but even that, very, very good. I'm not going to make any adjustments over here. I'm very happy with that result. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And so now I've gone through the second step in what is my workflow for many of my images. The next thing that we're going to do is another really cool Topaz tool called Haze. And I'm going to go ahead over here to my adjustments. Now, just to be clear what's happened here, we started with this raw file right here, and we performed AI Clear on it. Then we took that image out to open the plugins, and we came back with this image. So the plugin InFocus produced this image. So we have essentially a new image that we're working for with no adjustments in it other than what was done over here in the first one. So the next thing I'm going to do is Haze. I'll go down and launch it. And Haze is another one. It's a very simple slider with this artifact suppression slider as well. But I like to go up, especially if you're just learning this software, if you come up to the presets that are in the adjustment. And by the way, each of the Topaz adjustments has a set of presets that you might use as starting points for what you want to do. And you can see here, there's dehaze, there's heavy dehaze, light dehaze. And you notice these two down here, these are ones that I've created and saved. So you can create your own preset, make your own settings, and then save it as a preset in this little preset place. And so I've got a couple of my own. I'm going to go to the one, I'm going to use heavy dehaze for this. And a lot of times you can do it, you can see where the sliders land with the different presets. So it's a good way to learn. And you might want to make a little bit of tweaks to those. And again, I'm just going on based on what I see on the image. And again, that looks really good. So here's our before where we started. And here's where we are now. And we've only done a couple things. The next thing that I want to do here, let's see. Okay, so next thing I want to do is a basic adjustment. So we're working with a raw file here. You can use JPEGs, but I get the best results working with raw. And when you do that, you have to do some initial work to the image to set the black and white points and so on. You notice the histogram up here. I want to look carefully at the histogram while I'm doing that, and you select that by clicking on the RGB button right here. It brings the histogram up. And as we look down here, what I want to do here is get my exposure right and set my black point on the left and my white point over here. So the first thing I'm going to do, I might start by just moving my exposure up just a tiny bit. And then I'm going to go down to my black level slider and I'm going to move it to the left while watching the histogram. And I want to bring it to the left until that histogram just bumps up against that left edge. If I run up that wall, I begin to crush the blacks and lose detail in the blacks, and I don't want to do that. Then on the other side, I want to take the white level slider and move it to the right. And again, I'm watching that histogram, and I want to bring it over until I get close to that edge. And you notice I'm not able to really get there, so I might need to come up and increase my exposure just a little bit. And I can also work with this highlight slider and move things over. And that's looking pretty good, I think. So I might drop my black level down just a tiny bit. So now there's our new exposure after that basic adjustment. Now, there's also a clarity slider in here, but I don't use that so much anymore because there are some other Topaz tools we're going to use that will help us do that. Sometimes I make a saturation adjustment, but this is plenty saturated right now, and in fact, I might even drop it down a little bit. I sometimes oversaturate. It's kind of a problem if I don't watch myself. Okay, so after the basic adjustment then, the next thing I'm going to do here is head down to precision contrast. And precision contrast is, again, one of the adjustment sets that you can purchase. It's really a fundamental one that you want to have in your toolkit. Precision contrast, you know, most of the apps that we adjust images with have a contrast slider, but usually it's a single slider. What we can do in Topaz is adjust at the micro, low, and medium contrast levels. So areas that have very little contrast between them, you can focus on just adjusting the contrast there. And throughout these different levels. So for example, if I take the micro contrast slider and move it to the right, I'm just going to max it out. Look where it's really played heavily in the grasses, in the gravel, in the leaves, where there is very little contrast between one area and another. Clearly that's way too much. So I bring that back to where I start to get to kind of a sweet point that balances out the contrast I'm looking for in these trees and leaves and gravel, but isn't too biting. Next, I'm going to go to my low contrast. Again, if I slide that all the way up, you can see where it's picking up the next level of contrast there. And again, you want to look for that sweet spot. And again, I'm mostly looking at the image, but I do pay attention to my histogram. Sometimes when you make these contrast adjustments, you can crush some blacks over here, or you can blow out some highlights. So you really want to watch that. If you do start doing that, you've got lighting sliders here that allow you to correct for that. And sometimes one of the ones that I like to play with here is this mid-tone slider, and it can bring the levels up just a little bit to brighten the image. And in doing this, I'm able to do this in this one without blowing out any of my highlights or anything. And that's a much better, I think that's a much better exposure. I like that. So there's our before, and there, let me do that again, before, and there's our after. So we've already improved this image tremendously. The next thing I'm going to go to is my precision detail. And this is based on the size of the details. So the gravel, you got very small details here. In his clothing, you've got bigger details. So what you're doing is actually affecting the detail in those areas, and you can choose to focus only on the shadow areas or only on the highlight areas. So I like to start by going to my shadows here. The shadow areas in this image are going to be his clothing here, this tree, maybe some of these shadows, and some of the shadows in between these leaves. So if I increase the detail, I'll bring it all the way up. You can see where it's brought out detail in a lot of those areas that I mentioned. So I'm going to back that off. And again, I'm kind of looking for that place where it's not too much and not too little. It's kind of some of it's a judgment call and your own artistic decisions, but something along those lines. And again, I'm watching my histogram to make sure I'm not getting outside of those boundaries there with my blacks and my whites. So that's looking pretty good. My medium detail, I'm gonna bring that up a little bit, and I'm kind of watching like his clothing and how some of that's playing. I want a little details there, and then the large details might even actually, well, I'll bring those up to just a tiny bit. So we also have the option to sharpen this, but I'm not going to do that at this point. And then again, we have these lighting sliders in the event we need to manage the histogram and our whites and blacks up in that. So it looks pretty good. I'm going to be satisfied with that and stop. So the next thing, so we could be done with this image. We could be done right now. There's the before, there's the after. It's really a nice image the way it is. One of the things that I like to do sometimes, I'm a real fan of the Orton effect. Used to be where stack slides together and it would give the image almost a glow, a radiance about it. And I really like using that effect sometimes. And one of the ways to get that effect with our images in Topaz is to go to our adjustments and use the one called Radiance. Now open that up. Again, there's a lot going on here, but the one place I work with here is the strength. And before I do this, let me just show you what you can do with this. You go up to your presets, and there's one called Dark Web, there's one called Edge Shock, Electric Lines. These are all way over the top for my taste for this image. That's probably closest. All I want to do, whoops, go back, reset that. All I want to do is give this a slight glow. So I'm going to take my strength and I'm going to take it up only to 4. And look, that's it. And I might even take it back down to 3 just because it doesn't need much. I just want to give it a little bit of a glow. And I might also add a little brightness slide or brightness adjustment here, and I might just drop my brightness down something like that. Actually, what I'd rather do, let me do this differently. Instead, I deleted that brightness. I'm going to go grab a basic, and I'm going to drop my black level down here, and which will darken my image just a little bit, instead of doing it the other way. So there, I'll bring that up. So now there's our exposure. We've got We don't have any, his shirt is not blown out, and this just gives us a nice glow. And then as one final thing that you could do with this, and this is something, again, the image is what you have to watch and see if it's going to work for you on that image. There's something called focal blur. And again, it's just another effect that can help you bring attention to the subject of your image. And so you can see how I'm dragging the circle around. You can size it, you can shape it, whatever. And if you come over to your tools here, you've got a transition slider. If we take the transition all the way down, you have a very sharp line between the blur and the not blur. As you increase that transition number, you can see how it begins to soften that transition. I like a pretty soft transition. I don't even want to see the line there. And I want to kind of shape that. And then you can take that blur and bring it down a little bit, something like that. So what you have is a very, very soft blurred area, and it looks something like that. So you have the focal point on your farmer walking up the road. You've got everything else very soft, and it's just another technique that I like to use. You might find it that you could apply that to some of the images that you work with. And then the last thing I do here, I'm ready to add my signature. Over here on the left, you'll see the checkerboard. This is a transparency with my signature on it. And I'm going to drag that and drop it over here, and it adds a new image layer and places my signature over the image. And I can then take my mouse and just size and position the signature where I want it. This is a signature that I had made by Topaz Studios, or Topaz, I'm sorry, this is Topaz Studios. I meant Photo Logo. I'm actually an affiliate rep for them, and I think in the email you get from Heath after this webinar, you'll see a link to check this out if you're interested. It's just a cool way of adding your signature. So that's it. That's image number one. So this is ready to save it out to wherever you save it. And by the way, when you go to save these, I'm just going to do a save as here. You can save these as a JPEG, a TIFF, a PNG, or as a Topaz file also. If you save it as a TSP, it will retain all of your adjustments over here, so you can come back and work with the image again with all those still there. So I'm not going to save that, but I wanted to show you that. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and we'll delete that one. And let's go grab another image. This next image is one that I shot on my trip out west with my friend Dan Sniffen, who's a remarkable photographer. I know some of you out there know him. This was in the bristlecone pine forest. Gosh, I forgot the name of the place that we went, but it's in the White Mountains. It's just a beautiful place. If you ever get a chance to go there, I really recommend it. It's one of the most somber, beautiful places I've ever been on earth. These trees some of them are 4,000 years old at 12,000 feet. And we got up at 3:30 in the morning and went up there so we could be there at sunrise. And this is one of the shots that I made that morning. This is a Fuji shot. We're looking at a raw file here. So again, my workflow is going to start, and I don't need to do any cropping with this. It's level. I don't need to do anything. I'm ready to go. I'm going to go in here and go to my AI Clear right off the bat. There's not a lot of noise in this, but watch this branch right here and watch how it will clean some of that up by just eliminating the noise at the lowest strength level. It's a really remarkable piece of software. It does take a minute. I'm using a Mac, and it'll go a little faster if you use a JPEG, but your results are so much better with a raw file. There it goes. And look, I don't know if you saw that. Look at that, how much different it is. I don't know. Here's before. It's kind of fuzzy, and there's after. It just cleans it right up. Let's go ahead and bring that down. So the next thing I want to do on this is, again, this little formula that I do. I'm not going to do InFocus on this. This is very sharp already. I'm not going to do that. but I am going to do dehaze. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to grab dehaze. And once again, I could choose from these presets, and I'm going to go, let's see what Rad Sky looks like. That's too much. Let's go with, I kind of like this heavy dehaze. And I could make some adjustments here, but I'm happy with what I'm seeing there. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that. And then let's see, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm ready to go down to my precision. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong. I'm looking at my notes here. I still have to process the raw file. So I want to go back up to my adjustments and do a basic adjustment right here. And so again, I want to look at my histogram, which is really very different because this is a silhouette that we have going on. So our histogram is a lot different than the last one we looked at. What I want to do here, again, is set my white and black points. I could take my black point down just a little bit here, again, bringing it over to that area. And I'm not so much worried about crushing my blacks here because this was intended to be a silhouette. And then over here on my white point on the high side of things, we've got this bright spot white right here, and I just want to make sure that it's not overdone. So I can move that back just a tiny bit, but it's really kind of okay. I'm really okay with that exposure. I could, if I wanted to bring any of the detail out in the foreground a little bit, I could bring my exposure up just a tiny bit, bring my white level back down a tiny bit, and then, oops, there we go. Let's leave it like that. And then let's go into, after the basic adjustment, I want to go to my precision contrast again, which is down here. And again, we're looking at the areas that have very small difference in contrast. So if I move this slider up, let's just play with it a minute. If I take it all the way up, I'm really bringing out a lot more of this foreground, but I'm baking this back here. I could use masking. If you see, there's an artifact appearing here. It's really not the look I'm going for. I'm also blowing everything out, but I'm going to back that off and just bring it up maybe just a little bit to get some of that. And like so, and then I might drop my highlights down just a little bit. There we go, something like that. And I've got saturation and other controls, but I'm not going to need any of those for this. I'm going to close that out. And then the last thing I want to do here on this is go to my precision detail again. And here's where you can really get into some, just, working with the bright and dark areas. I'm going to switch to shadows. So I'm working only with these darker areas of the image. And I can take my small details and increase that. And I'm starting to bring out some of this landscape in the front, but I'm also starting to pick up, looks like I'm picking up a little bit of a artifact over there. So I need to back that off.
It's probably an artifact of running GoToWebinar at the same time because it takes up a lot of your video resources.
Oh, okay. Because I
So
haven't seen that one. I haven't seen that doing it on my own. Very good. I'm not going to worry about it. So what I was saying here is we can increase our details here to bring out some of this, even medium details a little bit, just to bring out the sense of context. And that's it. And I'm not going to sharpen anything here. I don't want to mess with this beautiful smooth sky and these layers that I'm getting in color. And that's it. I'm going to go ahead and close that up. And that's it. I'm done with that image. And I'm going to go ahead and drag this over my signature. And I can size that signature down to, oops, what did I do? I don't want to do that. Let's reset that. Okay. Then notice the reset button over here. That's your escape hatch if you screw up like I just did. So then I'm just going to bring that over here in this darker area and voila, something like that. Okay. So let me go ahead and close that up and we're going to delete this and let's save. Okay. So now I want to get into a little bit about using remasks. So I'm going to go grab an image. I mentioned that we did all this shooting out in Ohio at this preserve for endangered species, and it's really a blast to shoot there. It's you can actually do a safari like you would if you were in Africa. These animals run loose on a 10,000 acre landscape in the center of Ohio. They have giraffes and rhinos and zebras, all kinds of stuff. And so these are the giraffes we photographed that day. Actually doing a workshop there again next spring. If you're interested, you can find these things on my website and see what kinds of trips we have planned for later this year and next year. Okay, so these are raw files again, so they're taking a minute. It looks like did I load it twice? I guess I did. My fault. All right, so we'll close that out. So this is the image I want to work with. The very first thing I'm going to do is crop it down again. And I definitely encourage that you do this when you're shooting, but sometimes you don't. And but there's plenty of pixels to work with here. This is a Fuji image. So I'm going to crop it down to something like that and say done. And it's going to take its second. And there's our crop. So the first thing again that I'm going to do in my workflow is go down to AI Clear, and I'm going to let AI Clear work its magic on this, and it'll clean up the giraffe's coat and a lot of these patches and colors and the fine hair here, and just does a really, really nice job. Okay. It does take a second, but like I said, it's really worth it.
It is actually analyzing the image, and because you're on a Mac, it runs a little bit slower than PC. Mac has to use different tools because this AI technology is so new, they haven't really optimized it for Mac yet. We've actually had to rewrite a lot of the core code of this. So we're working on ways to make it faster on Mac. There should be future updates that increase the speed a lot, but as of right now, it does run a little slow on Mac.
Well, and it, as Heath said too, it's running a lot slower because we're doing the webinar. You'll find it runs faster even on your own, on your own machine at home. So it's not a deterrent at all for me. I wish it was faster, but it doesn't bother me. So I wish it was faster for you today. Okay, so we've done this image. The next thing I want to do, we did AI Clear. I'm going to go ahead and work through my workflow because I want to get this image the way I want it before I take it into ReMask. I'm going to go ahead and do Dhaze. And let that happen. And I'm going to choose, let's see. Oh, let's go with the heavy. I don't know. It's again, it's a judgment call, something along there. And then you can tweak it if you want with the sliders, something like that. And then I want to go to precision contrast. And again, I'm going to want to bring out the detail in that coat. If I expand that, we can see a little bit of that. Bring out the there, and maybe just a little tweak there, and really brings out the details in this beautiful coat. Now you notice over here we're starting to get a little bit of up on this edge. I'm not seeing anything blowing out, but if I felt like it was, I could take my highlight slider here and drop it down just a little bit and eliminate any possibility that I'm blowing something out here. There may be something up here in the top of the image that is getting a little bit bright. But anyway, you can adjust those things. I'm going to keep moving here. And I'll collapse that. And collapse that. Okay, the last thing that I want to do here then, again, is my precision detail. And I'm going to go in here for that. And let me just slide that up a little bit. And again, with this one, I'm going to go and work with the shadow areas and bring up some of the detail there. And watch out, see how it brought the brown spot, the brown patches in his fur up a little bit. If we can do a little bit of medium, and that's looking pretty good to me. Now we can also go to our highlights. Now it's going to focus more on these brighter areas in the image. And this is where you have to make a decision. Heath and I were talking about this earlier. You might prefer a smoother look to the to the image than in those areas here, because when you brighten or when you articulate the details in this white area, you're also bringing up the dirt and the grunge and all of that. For me, that's what I prefer. I like that realistic look. So I'm going to bump those highlight details up just a little bit, and we're going to get that fur to really look kind of wild. So that's really all I want to do there. I still looks like I might be blowing out a little bit there, so I'm going to drop those highlights down. Come on. Drop those highlights down just a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and let's see, I'll collapse that. And now I'm ready to take this into ReMask. So again, this is a plugin. I'm going to go and open it up here and launch it. Now you can launch these through Photoshop or Lightroom, but I'm using it as a standalone here. When you open it up into ReMask, this is what you'll see, everything in green. They use what they call a tri-map. It's basically 3 colors. You have green for keep, red for cut, and blue is where you'll tell it to compute the difference between the foreground and the background. So the first thing I do is come in here and take my brush size and I bring it up pretty high. Usually, in fact, I'm going to max it out. It's really surprising to me, but then I'm going to select the blue brush.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it'll show.
Okay,
It's
so
just the mouse cursor isn't updating. And again, that's another GoToWebinar thing. That's
okay, all right. So usually you have a circle. See, this is what's really weird. You have a circle with a plus sign in it. You want to put that plus sign right on the inside of the line that you're following. It's really weird because when I first started doing this, man, I used a little brush and I tried to be real detailed. You don't have to do that. And you just kind of go on the inside of the line, and what you're doing, you're giving Topaz the information it needs on both the subject and the background to make a decision about where to cut it. And so you don't have to be real particular. It's interesting. And so especially on fur like this, you want to give it plenty of room, even if you have to go back out here and kind of go around the edge a little bit more. And so there we go. That's it. Now we're ready to fill in the areas that we want to cut. So down here are our fill buckets. I'm going to click on the red fill bucket for cut, and I'm going to tap up here and fill this area. Now, normally you'd see a little bucket icon, but as he's mentioned, it's not filling. So right now you have the cut area, the green area is the keep area, and the blue area is the compute area. And let's just see what happens. I'm going to click compute mask, and it's doing its thing. Wow, that was fast. It did it quickly. So what it's done is given us our mask, and it's really not bad. I'm really pleased. So anywhere you see these areas that have gray that are coming through, those are going to give you problems with your mask. So you need to clean that up. So the way to do that, we're going to come over to our brushes again, and I'm going to use the green fill brush. I wish you could see this because usually I have a little circle.
you might make the brush size a little smaller because it's gonna.
Yeah, I definitely need to do that.
And I'm
Thank you.
sorry about that. That's one of the GoToWebinar's little quirks is sometimes it messes up your cursor overlay stuff.
Okay. Well, so just guys, imagine where my black cursor is. You're going to have a circle with a little plus in it, and you want to make your circle not real big, and you're going to tap. And I'm not dragging and brushing like you normally would. I'm tapping in these areas, and you see how the gray is disappearing. Now, if I get too close to the edge and tap, it fills out here. Well, to eliminate, you don't want that. To eliminate that, you would go to your cut brush and do the same thing on the other side of the image to fix that. Now I've kind of screwed that up a little bit, so I'm going to recompute it and go back in and tap it again. So pretty good. Get up here in the, oh shoot, I want to do that. And I'm using the just Control Z to undo that. I want that brush to be a lot smaller up here, and see how it fills the gray areas in as soon as I tap in there. As long as my brush is small enough, it's going to go in those areas. Now here I want to take out this fuzzy area on the back side, so I switch to the cut brush. Again, I want it small so I can get in these little crevices, but you can see how it's cleaning it up. And I'm kind of going as quick as I can here. It can be a little tedious, but the results are so worth it. Let's switch back to green for fill. and I'm filling in these gray areas here, and I'm just going to click my way down the main, and I could probably get a little bit bigger brush now, and I'm just clicking, and you can see as I click, it's filling in those gray areas, and you want to eliminate all of those, so otherwise your background is going to show through where those gray areas are coming up. It does a remarkable job with things like the fur here. I think you'll be amazed. Now I'm going really fast, so hopefully I'm not setting you up for not seeing a good example, but it really does a nice job. I can show you the results of other images too. One last little click here. Oop, a little bit too far in there, maybe smaller brush, and just get that little spot. Okay, so now I see a couple little places where I can still see gray around his eyes, and I don't want that. And that looks pretty good. So now, one of the other things that you can do while you're doing this cleanup, if you go down to the bottom, there's a background palette, and you can click on that, and you can choose another background color. So there's our black background, and that doesn't look too bad. We've got a few little places to clean up, but you could choose a different background color that might allow you to see differently. So if I choose red, I might be able to see the blue a little better. Yeah, so I can see some of the blue that's there. So now one of the things I like to do is split my screen, and I can look at this image over here, and I can see where that blue is coming through, and I can take my red brush, and I don't even have to go over here. I can go on this image. Whoops, what did I do there?
That was the fill
I
tool.
don't
I
want
was
to
trying
know.
to get you in time.
Yeah, I hit the fill tool down here instead. Okay, so here's the brush,
I
and I'm
actually
going to
have
go in
another
here.
I actually have another tip about this too, because that is your background spilling over. If you look at the
Yeah,
color sliders underneath compute mask, there's one for
yep,
foreground recovery.
yep.
If you turn that up a little bit, it'll take care of some of that blue for you.
Okay, all right. I'll go ahead and turn that up a little.
Sorry if I jumped ahead of you in your presentation.
No, that's okay. No, this foreground tool is really awesome. Did that take care? It did help a little bit. I still have a little bit of cleanup, like there's a little spot right here and over here. Now, the other thing that you can do, if we go to the edge shift, if I bring this all the way up, look at our edge. And here, let me go back into single. You see how, and I'll enlarge it so we can see better. See this edge going all the way around? That's with the edge shift all the way at 100 or all the way up to 10. That's 100% basically on this. If I drop that down, look what happened. It eliminated a lot of that edge that was the wrong color. So these are just some of the ways that you can quickly clean up. And I'm going to go in here and try this. I'm trying to get that. So we could spend a lot of time being particular about this, but you get some of the idea of what you can do using these tools. Now, what I like to do at this point, I'm going to go ahead and fit this back to the screen. If I come down here, I can lay another image behind the giraffe, and I want to use a texture. So I'm going to click the image, and I'm going to go and grab, these are textures by Kathleen Clemens, I mentioned before. Her stuff is great. You should definitely check her out. Go ahead and and open this up, and it's going to pop this texture behind our mask. So now it's too small, right? Well, if you click over here on the brightness button, or I'm sorry, on the orange button here above the brightness button, you can get the handles and drag it out and fill the screen. So now there's our giraffe on this beautiful background. Well, we can go down now, and you have all of these adjustments that you can use to adjust this background. So we could drop the brightness or increase it. We could mess with the contrast. One of the things I like to do is drop the saturation down to nothing, and then you have this wonderful black background, which is great for a lot of things. But let's just keep that up. And then you can also adjust the temperature of the image. And then the thing that I really like too is the blur slider. If we take that blur up to 100, look at what it does to that. It just softens that background, and now you have this beautiful image to work with. We're going to save it out to another spot on a hard drive or wherever you save your images, and then bring it back into Topaz to make any further adjustments. But because we already did the adjustments we wanted on the giraffe earlier, this image is basically done. I might only bring it back into Topaz to add my signature or something of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this out, and it just takes us back here. And I'll show you what, this is what the image looks like. It looked like when I had it finally finished. It's, again, basically that same image that we just saw, but I think I had a little bit different tonality, but it's the same texture. And there you can see, I mean, it's just a really fun way to separate your subject from your background. And look how clean and wonderful that mask is. Just to give you an idea, some of the other, I know we're getting close on time here. This is another one that I did of zebras. Again, the background was cluttered with other zebras and everything, and it did a great job of cutting this out. This is another one of the 2 giraffes that I did that was really fun. Again, there's that black texture. So I know we're almost out of time. I don't know. It's hardly one of my webinars unless I do an infrared image. So I'm going to very quickly, unless you stop me, Heath.
Nah, go for it.
I'm going to go ahead and show. Many of you know I love infrared photography, and I shoot with a little, right now, a Lumix point and shoot camera that I had converted by Spencer Camera, and I love it. This is the raw file, what it looks like when you bring a, whoops, I did it again. Oh, I see what I'm doing. So this is what the raw file looks when you bring it in. And the very first thing that I'm going to do with this image, again, I'm going to start with AI Clear, and I'm not going to even remove that pink yet. I'm just going to go ahead and do this. I'm still experimenting to see if it makes any difference if I drop the saturation and turn this into black and white before I run AI Clear, but I haven't noticed the difference. So I start here. And so AI Clear is doing its magic. And then once I get this, I'm going to work it through a basic adjustment to set the white balance, run Dhaze and precision detail, and it just brings these black and white infrared images to life. I just have so much fun with it. I'm really excited because I just ordered a Fuji T1 and I'm having it converted for infrared. So there's our sharpened, or our I'm sorry, noise reduced image. Now I'm going to go in and do a basic adjustment. The very first thing I'm going to do here is drop my saturation down to 0. So now we're starting to see our black and white. I'm going to then take my black point and move it over here, watching my histogram again, and set it down to as far as I can go. Now I may need to go ahead and bump my exposure here a little bit. Too much. And my white point, my black point, and so on. So I'm going very quickly here, but essentially that's what I'm doing. Then the next thing from there, you can see how it's really brought things out. I've got a little hot spot here that I'd probably work with, avoiding that being blown out, but I'm going so quick here. The next thing I'm gonna do on this is a dehaze. So it's some of that same workflow. I'm going to do the heavy dehaze. And then the next thing I'm going to do is precision contrast. And bring that down here. And for this, on the precision contrast, I'm going to do something a little different here. I like this sky to be real creamy. So instead of upping the contrast, I'm going to reduce the micro contrast and watch the sky. It just got real nice and creamy. So I'm going to leave that way, and I may take my medium contrast up just a little, and I don't know, I may stop there just because we're running out of time. But I would do a precision detail on this, and then one of the other things I like to do at the end is to add a touch of radiance to these black and white images to give them a little bit of a glow. And again, you don't need to move that up any more than about 3, and you get that real nice kind of nice glow. And then as a final step, I would simply crop the image. And again, to retain my aspect ratio, I'm going to go to original, and I'm going to crop that wall out, and it looks maybe like it's almost level, but you can level things too over here with this angle slider. And done. And there's our image, and I could drag my signature into that or whatever. So, and I would work with this a little bit more, eliminate this hot spot here and bring out some of the detail. But that's generally the way I process my infrared images. So Heath, I know we've gone long, so I'm going to turn it back over to you and let you wrap up with the things you have to do.
If you guys want to follow Rad, you can always visit his website, especially to check out his upcoming workshops at raddrewphotography.com. You can also follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/raddrewphotography. And again, to reiterate, if you've got questions we didn't get to because we kind of had to skip over the Q&A today, check him out, message him through his you've got a contact, is it a contact form, or it gives contact information on your website?
You can send a contact email to me through my my website. Yeah, that's probably the best way.
Okay.
I'm also on Facebook. You can message me on Facebook. I'm under Rad Drew. I think I'm the only Rad Drew out there.
It is a pretty awesome first name, Rad, if you will. And guys, if you have, I'm sure you get that all the time, man. I had to. If you have any questions, you can always contact us at webinars@topazlabs.com. You sign up for upcoming webinars at topazlabs.com/webinars. Love having you guys here. I know we filled up right off the bat, and everybody else, I hope you have a good afternoon, morning, or evening, wherever you are around the world.
Thanks, everyone.